Hey, welcome back to Good Guardian Canine Working Dog. My name is Alton. Thank you for joining me again. Good Guardian Canine Working Dog. More than just dogs. I'm hoping that you'll enjoy this one. It's an interview done by Frontline PRESA. Robert from Frontline PRESA. He interviewed Manuel CURTO Jr., speaking on the history of the PRESA Canario and the development of the dogs, and also the new structuring of his website of information. I think this is quite an informative interview, a very good piece of history, and a well-rounded body of information on the PRESA Canario. So I also want to thank Robert so much for allowing me to share this interview with you that he's done, share his content. It's a 3-part interview, but it's quite long, so I'll be dividing it into about 6 parts, and I'll share it with you that way, making each part about half an hour long. Robert is a very well-known breeder of the PRESA Canario. He certainly doesn't need any plug from me, but you can gain a better understanding of his dogs by viewing the dogs on his page on Instagram at frontline_PRESA. Very solid working dogs, very driven dogs, very well-balanced PRESA Canarios. I've been following his dogs for about 4 or 5 years, I think, about that much. So you can find him at Instagram at frontline_PRESA. I hope you enjoy this one. Again, enjoy your dogs. Take care of your families. Take care of those who you can as much as you can. Enjoy the videos, and I will see you in the next video.
Good morning, Manuel.
Hi, good morning.
Thanks for tuning in for us. I know it's 3 o'clock in the morning there, but we appreciate you tuning in.
And also, when I was coming here to my office, because now I'm in the kennels in my office, the police stopped me and he told me that if I was drunk, because I live in a party area, and I was like, no, man, I have to go to do a live. And he was, okay, let's go.
Right. All right. So we're going to be quick with this, so that way we're not wasting any time. Let's start off by describing the breed and how it was in the earlier years of development over in the islands.
Okay. I think that because I have read the question that you sent me, I will reply different questions in the same talking. Okay, so I think that at first we have to remember the history of the PRESA Canario, the first dogs that came to the Canary Islands. Okay, so here to the Canary Islands in the conquerors' times, when the Spaniards came here to the Canary Island, there were no dogs here on the Canary Islands. Only small dogs that their name was canchas, and it was like this. The cranium is 10 centimeters. Okay, so we have to remember that here in the Canary Islands, there were no dogs. Okay, so the Spaniards came with the first dogs. What type of dogs they were? Okay, they were Spanish Mastiff. They were dogs to catch rabbits. I don't know, hounds. I think this is the name in English. Okay, prey type dogs, and also all different type of animals to here to the Canary Islands. Okay, so that started there, and then we have some documents that the name is ordinance, and let me check the translation here, because this is important to know it. Okay, here. Dogs in agreements and ordinances, that are some text that describes how the dogs were used here in the Canary Islands. And they make a differentiation between the cattle dogs, that is what we know as majorero, and the prey dogs. And what were they used for? They were used for warding, they were used for protection, but the difference is that the prey dogs were used by the butchers to catch the cows, and the majoreros, that in those times it was only cattle dogs. We told them now as majoreros, but they didn't have that name. They were used for the livestock, to control the livestock. Okay, so the beginning of the breed, I mean, during all those years, since the starting of the 20th centuries, those was the type of dogs that we had here in the Canary Island. And this information about dog in agreements and ordinances, we only have information about this until 100 years before the 20th century. So we have 100 years that we don't have any type of information, because the last information that we had was dogs in agreements and ordinances. Okay, so fighting dogs starting in the early 20th century. Okay, using this type of dogs that I told you, that was the prey type dogs and the majorero, that they mixed them, also using Spanish Mastiff, using Great Dane, and using the Bull Terrier. Okay, so that mix of dogs were used for fighting, but not the type of fighting as, for example, with the pit bulls, that is for death, and you can put your money, like you can bet your money to the winner. No, it was not nothing like that. It was something very casual, like in the traditional parties here, okay, or in the weekends, okay, let's fight our dogs. In Spanish, it's pechada. That is this type of dog of fighting. It's like lions are like gladiators. They fight, okay, one of the dogs win, and they separate. And there's a lot of photos. I don't think that I have any of these photos here, but I'm going to show some photos here that I have on PRESA, that you can see all the photos here. Okay, here you have one photo. Okay, here you have a photo of those times, and as you see, look at the tail of those dogs. It's a hairy tail, and with this form, like the majorero type of tail. Okay, so in the in the 1930s, more in the 1940s, fighting dogs was prohibited here in the Canary Islands. So people will not fight anymore. So this type of dogs start getting disappeared, because when people is not interested in something, they stop doing it. Okay, so this is what happened with these types of dogs. And then we have to start with the actual PRESA Canario, because we have to remember that the PRESA Canario concept, as we know it today, started in the 1970s. Before that, it was only PRESA type dogs that was used for that, for warding, for fighting, and everything. But this started in 1975, when my father started writing in the LDA newspaper about this type of dogs, and he decided, okay, what name we can give to these dogs? Okay, they are for prey, presa, and we are in the Canary Island, Canario. So PRESA Canario, that's the thing. Okay, so when we talk about PRESA Canario, we are talking about dogs starting in the 1970s, no before, okay? But to create this new breed, because it's a new breed, they take in mind the descriptions of the fighters from those times, the descriptions of their dogs, and also the measurements and everything from Bobby and Pipa, that were my first, my father's first dogs. Okay, so using that measurements and with the description, my father designed the first breed standard that was only a draft that was published on the Doggy People magazine. Okay, so that's the beginning of everything. Now in the breed. Then in the 1989 is the famous year where the standard, PRESA Canario first standard, was created. Okay, so it's supposed that this standard was going to be sent to the PCA to be used as the traditional standard. Okay, but the problem is that in the year 2001, that was the year that PRESA Canario was going to get accepted by the PCA, since in the 1999 we had a very big problem here in Europe with the aggressive dogs, that in all countries, in Norway, in Spain, in Sweden, all those countries, all time in the newspapers, on the TV and everything, people talking about this dog attacked to this woman, to his owner, to a kid. Okay, so people was crazy in that moment about this situation. So the PCA recommended to the Spanish club the Spanish PRESA CANARIO club, that was the official club here in the Canary Islands, to make some changes. Okay, so the most important change that they made was changing the name from PRESA CANARIO to Dogo Canario, because the word Dogo Canario sounds less dangerous or is not too much related with fighting dogs than PRESA CANARIO. But also they take advantage for that, and they also changed the type of biting from the PRESA CANARIO. They said that the overbiting was right, that there was no problem with that, and also they changed the maximum size, because we have to remember that there in the United States, people usually likes more bigger dogs. Okay, so it was more focused on the United States market, because in the 90s is when it started getting dogs exported to the United States. And also, the most important change that they made was in the history part. Okay, so this is the reason why the only valid standard is the 1989 standard, because all the rest of the standards, the UKC standard included, the FCA, the FCE, and the AKC, that are the most relevant clubs that exist, all of them are not right in the history part, because they said, because I have it here, that the Majorero, we only talk about Majorero in the other islands, because the Majorero is for Fuerteventura. And to the people from Fuerteventura, we call them Majoreros. Like from Gran Canaria, they are Canariones or Canarios. In Fuerteventura is the same, Majoreros. In Fuerteventura, they told them perro de ganado or perro de la tierra. That it means dog from the land or cattle dog only. So in the other islands is what we told them. And all this standard says that the PRESA CANARIO, in the creation, the Majorero is needed, because it's the only dog that have the old genealogy, and I mean they have been in the Canary Islands for a long time. But this standard says that it's a pre-Hispanic dog, the Majorero. But as I told you, here in the Canary Islands, they only were small dogs that they named were canchas, and we have photos of the museum of the cranium. Here we have a cranium of those dogs that is 10 centimeters long. So this is 10 centimeters, and this was the cranium. So we can imagine that they were small dogs. What we know is the Majorero is a big dog. So I have some photos of them. This is a true Majorero, because I have seen on internet, on other videos, people talking about the Majorero, and I have seen them with clear eyes, blue. No, that's not a Majorero. And I have a lot more photos here. You see, this is a Majorero, okay? Look at the person that is near to him. He's at the size of a PRESA CANARIO. So a 10 centimeters cranium, that is the only thing that the explorers and investigators have found here in the Canary Island, don't correspond to the Majorero. So what we know is that those dogs that all these clubs are mentioning here on their standards are not accurate. I don't know if this is the word, but they are not related with those dogs that we can see in the reality. Okay, so if we start that in the history part, they are grown, none of them are valid. The only one that says the real origin of the PRESA CANARIO, and that is true, is the 1989 standard that is in my father's book. That this is public, that this was the first standard. Okay, this is the photo when the first standard was published, with this photo and everything. And it says that the PRESA CANARIO is a mix between some English and other countries' origin dogs, and perro de ganado Majorero, the Majorero dog, and PRESA type dog. That PRESA type dog, if we see the type of dogs of those time in the Conquistor time, it was the Spanish Bulldog. Okay, so this is the basis of the creation of the PRESA Canario. Why they decided to change the history? Okay, this was a new breed, but for commercial purpose, it's more interesting to tell that it has a very ancient origin, that it has more than 500 years of history. But that's not true. That's not the reality. And a lot of people here in the Canary Island, here we have a problem that is the nationalism. All of the people of the Canary Island, most of the people of the Canary Island is not related in the genetic with people that with the Aboriginal people of the Canary Island. They are descendants from French people, from Spanish people, from La Peninsula, that is the continental Spain, from Portugal, but they feel like they have a part of our gene, and if they have a part of our gene, it's only a small amount, like the 3% or 5%, but they claim, as they are, something very Aboriginal, that they are the true Canary people. And they try to show to the people that the PRESA Canario is something that the Aboriginals had, and since they are from the Canary Islands, they are related with that. But that's 100% not true. The PRESA Canario has a recent origin because it's the product of recent mixes. Because in the 1970s, the crosses that were used was English Bulldog. That's the reason of the white spots in the PRESA Canario. Bull Terrier, another reason of the white spots. Spanish Mastiff, because the Majorero and the Spanish Mastiff are related. Because the Spanish Mastiff is used in Spain, in mainland Spain, for the wolf, to protect the livestock from the wolf. Here on the Canary Island, we don't have wolf, but it's also used for protection of the livestock from robbers and from anything that can happen. And another reason why the perro de ganado majorero is not an Aboriginal dog, is not a pre-Hispanic dog, is that there exists another breed very similar to the majorero, that its name is Cao de Castro Laboreiro, that is in the north of Portugal, that is very similar to the PRESA Canario. And why? Because they have the same origin. They are also a Spanish Mastiff, but this small type of Spanish Mastiff that were used to place where there are not wolves. And let me show you a photo of a Cao de Castro Laboreiro. Okay, here we have a photo. So if we make the comparison, this is a Majorero, this is a Cao de Castro Laboreiro. Okay, so we have the evidence that the Majorero doesn't have Canary origin, because the only investigation that were made here in the Canary Island, the only craniums that they find were only 10 centimeters. And we have these dogs in Portugal that are very similar to the Majoreros. That's the thing. Okay, so I was telling about the creation of the PRESA Canario. The breeds that were used was the English Bulldog, the Bull Terrier, the Bull Mastiff, the English Mastiff, PRESA type dog that we have here in the Canary Island, Great Dane, that here these people, Great Dane is the origin of the black coat, and it was used also in the fighting times. Okay, so black always existed in the PRESA Canario, and we have photos where you can see black PRESA Canario, like this photo here, that you can see a black PRESA from fighting times, from the end of fighting times. And as you see, his phenotype is very similar to the current dogs that we have. Irema CURTO, and a person that breeds black PRESA, that they have the same coat pattern as a Great Dane, that they always have the white here, and then all the rest is black. In a very small amount, Boxer. This is curious because it's the opposite form to the PRESA Canario, because PRESA Canario needs to be from the back of the dog to the column, 2 centimeters of difference. So the dog is like this. So all the body weight go to the front arms. So they walk like a lion, like a big feline type of walking. It was also used the Dogo de Burdeos. You know Robert Dogo de Burdeos breed. I don't know. Yeah, okay. So it was also used. Then in the 90s.
Is that where the liver color comes into play at?
Okay. Because some people was thinking that it comes from the pitbull red nose, but here in the Canary Islands in the 80s and also in the 90s, were used the Dogo de Burdeos, because this is something funny, because the Spanish club of the PRESA Canario, what was the responsible of the creation of the Dog Canario, they were the ones that used a lot the Bull Mastiff, the English Mastiff, and the Dogo de Burdeos. That's the reason why most of the PCI dogs, they are sand color and fawn color. That's the reason, because the Bull Mastiff and the English Mastiff. Why in the PRESA Canario creation times they used the Bull Mastiff, the English Mastiff, the English Bulldog, and the Dogo de Burdeos? Because all of them were created using the Spanish Bulldog. For example, the English Bulldog is a direct descendant from the Spanish Bulldog. The Bull Mastiff is a mix between the English Bulldog and the English Mastiff, and also the English Mastiff is a product descendant from the Spanish Bulldog. So since we didn't have here in the Canary Islands and on any other part of Spain pure Spanish Bulldog, the nearest thing that you can use to produce that type of dog with brachycephalic head, with a white nose, a white chest, white arms, is using this descendant of the Spanish Bulldog. Okay, that's the reason why it also uses the Spanish Mastiff, because it's the most similar to the Majorero, because they have the same genetic. It's also impossible, believe me, to find a great Majorero with the great temperament. So the thing that they had and those times that was also similar was the Spanish Bull Mastiff. And if you check the genealogy, for example, you will find in our line, in the back, in the beginnings, a dog that his name was Grugnon, and Grugnon was a pure English Bulldog. And you will also find in other lines that are also related with us, because we have to remind that my father was the first one that started making crosses. It's also a pure Spanish Mastiff, and you can see the genealogy of that pure Spanish Mastiff. That is like very curious to see the real origins. And talking about Bull Mastiff, also the first winner of the first monographic was a pure Bull Mastiff with cropped ears. So you just can imagine the situation. I was talking about that the Burdeos dog was used until the 90s. What is the reason of this? Because in those times they continued making crosses, because the Spanish PRESA Canario club decided that the PRESA Canario was already created, because for them it was very easy, because they only had to use Bull Mastiff and English Mastiff. You see that most of the PCI dogs are in a 90% as an English Mastiff looking dogs. They have like a lot of stock. They don't have zygomatic art that they look like this. In the PRESA Canario standard says that the head and the muzzle need to be in continuous. What makes this? The zygomatic arch, that is this part, that made the continuation between the cranium and the muzzle. The English Mastiff doesn't have this. It's like directly the nose and the head, like two different blocks, okay? in the Presa Canario, it must not be like this. So for them, for the Spanish club of the Presa Canario, it was easy because they say, okay, the Presa Canario is already created. We just use Bull Mastiff. Okay, we have a big dog that will sell great in the United States. So they decided that everything was made, but the Presa Canario breeders that had a clear concept in their mind, they have in mind that the Presa Canario also needs to have the temperament, because if not, about what protection dog we are talking about if the dog don't protect, if the dog don't bite to any robber that comes to your property, what type of dog are we selecting? Okay, so that's the reason why people here on the Canary Island is in those times until the 90s, they continue mixing with the Dogo de Burdeos, with the boxer in a very small amount because it's 0% a desirable type of body to use. Also, the temperament of the boxers, they are not great because they don't have good nerves. You make something like and they go running. They don't have the nerves, but some people use them. Also, in those times here in the Canary Islands, started the American style of fighting, like with money in the middle and everything. And until 2 years ago, they continued fighting. And now all of them are in the jail because they have like all the police behind them picking the phones and everything. So that's the thing. So Pitbull also was used in the 90s, but Pitbulls from the 90s. That is easier to find a great Pitbull more than a great Presa Canario, to be honest. So I can imagine why they used Pitbull in the 90s to produce this type of dog that they can war, they have the body, but they have also the stamina. They also use it, and this is something curious, but the Presa Canario also, some lines have also hound dogs. Type of hound dog that is from Ibiza. Let me find you a photo so people can know about what dog I'm talking about. The name in Spanish is Podenco y Vicenco. Okay, okay. Presa Canario also have this. Obviously, in a very, 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 very small amount, but it also have it because in most of the yards, in the properties from people in the countryside, these people with livestock, that they use the majorero, they also had this type of dogs for hunting rabbits, and those dogs get mixed. So when you use a majorero, when they use majoreros to introduce it to the Presa Canario, also these hound type of dogs went to the Presa Canario, and they also have liver coat. So if you make 1 + 1, it matches. Okay, so I was talking about in the Spanish club of the Presa Canario, what they made in the 90s. In the 90s, the Presa Canario was not created, it was not completed. Because if we remember that the standard appeared in the 1989, they started in the 1975, my father only. Don't think that everybody was breeding here. No, that's not true. All these people are younger than my father because my father is 77 years old, and all the rest of the people, they are 65, 62, and they started in the 80s. So let's do some mathematics. If they started in the 80s, the first mixes started in the 75, and the standard appeared in the 89, in 10 years, you have time to create a breed. No, you don't have time to create a breed. Yes, you can have a type of looking dog, but that's not a line. That's not a breed. You don't have dogs enough. That's the reason why in the first monographic, they selected a bull mastiff, a pure bull mastiff with cropped ears, because what they have, they doesn't have too much things. Some people I see in the social media that they say that they have the old lines from the 80s. Man, you really know what type of dogs existed in the 80s? Pure bull mastiff, first generation mixes, and that's the type of dog that you're claiming that you have. No, that's the region. And we have to remember that they were recent mixes. We can start talking about Presa Canario like Presa Canario, I think, that is starting in the 2000s. That you can see like more homogeneous dogs. They started getting exported to the United States. A lot of great dogs from those times. Also, the dog Canario was starting that time. Like, was a very nice year. I wrote the other day where it was Eva and Jen Chalder talking about these times. Those were the best times for the Presa Canario.